today we're talking trailblazers. So Pep, do you think in your life or in cultural generally, are there trailblazers that for you are really important, exciting, folks who you think of as being, I don't know, icons for you, the icon Peppermint?
Hey y'all, welcome back to Queer 101, the podcast where we talk about everything under the sun that has to do with queer art, queer culture, queer literature, and queer life and anything else we want to talk about. I am Peppermint.
And I'm Hugh the historian.
Meow! Hi, Hugh.
Hey!
Listen,
we have so much to talk about.
We sure do. I am so excited I'm still flying. I'm still reeling from not only our initial interview with Tourmaline, but everything else that we've sort of unfolded and unpacked with regards to the Marcia book, life, legacy. You can't even call it just like a book because it's her story.
I know. I feel like everyone kind of needs a month of Marcia in their life. It's like a new month we should insert into the calendar somewhere because there is so much to talk about, so much to go through, so much that she inspires and connects to and she herself thinks about and makes me think about. And I think that it's been really lovely to just take this like deep dive into it.
It's true. And I couldn't think of a better way to sort of top off the month of our month of Marcia. Because we've had some really great conversations, and I'm excited for today's conversation.
Me too. You know, I think that Marcia has always been a trailblazer, an icon, really. And I think that it would be remiss if we didn't discuss some of the other queer trailblazers in our lives and in queer life generally. Because that is, at her essence, I think, what Marcia is. She's a little bit of the future that came down here to lead us forward and also to find herself at a time when people told her not to, gave her no route to it, you know? And that kind of queer trailblazer spirit is incredible and deserves to be recognized.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just really befitting on Queer History Month, October, LGBTQ History Month, that we are able to acknowledge Marcia because, you know, she's obviously a major part of queer history. But beyond that, there's so much of her story that is still literally unsolved, as in no one has been, you know, convicted, or I don't even know if arrested, but certainly not convicted of her murder. And not to make it dark, but, you know, it just shows that her impact is indelible no matter what. But even there's still parts of her story that we don't know, and we're just discovering so much. And it's just wild to me that someone who we've been aware of for as long as we have, and certainly aware of the type of impact that they had, we still don't. There were still so many unanswered questions up until this moment about her life. And I'm thinking about Queer History Month now. And, you know, I couldn't help it. I was sort of going back and thinking about the video. I can't remember the name of the woman. I actually shared about her a couple of weeks ago. Trans woman from South America who was abducted by ICE enforcers on video, heartbreakingly. And I just remember thinking, I want to know more about her story. A report came out recently that she was reporting, you know, abuse in the facility that she was in, mistreatment. You know, that's probably like the most sort of like neutralized language that the news has put out. I'm sure it's more than that.
And this is Alice Correa, right? Alice Correa, for those of you listening at home, I believe that's her name.
Yes,
Brazilian woman.
So.
Yes,
Brazilian. Yeah, she's from Brazil. She's trans, and was taken on video. You know, the people that she was with, her companions that she was with, filmed her being snatched out of a car very brutally, And so that's not quite the same thing, of course, as Marsha P. Johnson. It's, at all. But this is, for so long, the only thing I knew about Marsha P. Johnson was that her body was found in the river.
Right. Yeah.
Even before I knew I knew she was this woman who was reported to have thrown the first proverbial or literal brick at Stonewall, and then her body was found in the river, and that's it. You know,
it's incredible because I think when I think about it, I think like, oh, in my head, I sometimes think like, okay, well, it's the past, and we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have instantaneous communications, and so things could get lost. But you bring up the case of Alice Correa, and it's like, that's happening right now. That's on video, and so many people don't know her name, and so many people don't know what she has gone through. And it sort of says to me, like, wow, it really reinforces that it's not just a process of history where some stories get lost and some stories get uplifted. It is all about, who you are and your access to power and how much you disturb the powerful, right? That's what helps you get remembered or misremembered, is whether the people in power want you to be remembered. And I don't think I knew anything about Marsha growing up at all. Maybe I was trying to think of like queer icons that I had exposure to, like before, say, college. And really, it was like pop stars, like we've already talked about, musicians, a few people in film. But in terms of like political trailblazers and icons, there was almost no one. I remember ACT UP as a general. They were on the news, and so I would see gay people and queer people and trans people in protests, but I didn't know any of their names. That was like the closest thing I could think of to like a political icon that I had access to before I got to college, where I started to learn Marsha and Sylvia and Leslie Feinberg and all of these individual folks. But it really was not something I had much, if any, access to.
No, because at every level, the queer people who were especially the politically noticeable queer people were challenging the systems of power, usually the corrupt systems of power, and disrupting either the system that sort of calls everyone to just follow the orders and march in line. So you're either disrupting the order or you're disrupting the process. And neither one of those two things are acceptable, I guess, to the people in power. And so they ain't going to build no statue to that.
and you dedicate your life to that. You make that kind of change, and it almost ensures that you will not have money. You will not have access to power yourselves. You will not be remembered in all of those ways. When I went off to college, I remember there was, I think she would have called herself a trans woman. We didn't talk about that, but there was a person in the small town where I was in school named David Lisa, and she rode around on her bike with her boombox attached to the front, and the bike was covered in little glittery streamers and flowers, and she played like 80s rock music that she biked around
from
to.
Like a little boombox?
Yeah, from a little boombox. And we would chat, like she liked my outfits, I liked her outfits, and she was the local icon. She was the face of queerness. And in the same way as Marsha, that she was dismissed as, I was always told that David Lisa was crazy, though she never seemed crazy to me. And she lived on the outskirts of society, and was sort of like transitionally housed. It was unclear. But she brought queerness into every space, every place that she went. And I think that those kind of icons, those people who... Alexis Pauline Gumbs is a really incredible writer, feminist, queer, black scholar, and she calls them the never straight. It's not about identity, right? It's not, is this a trans person, a gay person, but people who could not be closeted, would not be closeted. To live as themselves meant that they had to break all of these binaries and always be an icon. And David Lisa was, for me, the closest thing I had to like experiencing one in real life in like 1996, and she's not remembered today. I've talked to a few people who remember David Lisa, but there's no memorial to her. There are no books, there's no movie, there's no podcast about her, but she was like a local icon for me. people like that are, like Marsha was one of those people. She was one who was like above and beyond. But it's like people like that all over the country are our local little bits of our like chosen family, chosen ancestors, queer icons to celebrate. And I always like to bring David Lisa's name into the room when having these conversations.
Well, listen, this episode is not only dedicated to Marsha, but then also to the David Lisas out there making their way on their glitter bikes with their streamers attached. I remember I mean, that I guess that was for kids mostly. I don't know if they still have the streamers on the bikes, because I remember those were so fancy. I feel like all bikes look the same now, even for kids.
Yeah, they're all boring. So the way all cars are boring right now. It's like everything is the same set of colors and there's no life to it. And
interchangeable, corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of buildings, the woman who today we will give her golden brick for the final episode dedicated to her for now. If you're just joining us and you are deep into this conversation, welcome to the conversation. All month, Hugh and I have been talking about the new bestseller, Marsha, about the fabulous Marsha P. Johnson, of course, by Tourmaline.
Brilliant Tourmaline.
The brilliant Tourmaline, who's been making the rounds, and I've been really enjoying watching her videos. And it's really given us a lot to talk and think about.
It really has. And particularly today we're talking trailblazers. So Pep, do you think in your life or in cultural generally, are there trailblazers that for you are really important, exciting, folks who you think of as being, I don't know, icons for you, the icon Peppermint?
Yes. The answer is yes. Now, if you ask me who...
I'm putting you on the spot.
I would definitely say that, I mean, there's certainly people, I'm thinking of folks in New York. But I do think that there's people that I believe, just a handful of people, and certainly folks that are, since we're talking about Marsha P. Johnson, I'm thinking about trans and non-binary folks. I think of folks like Marty Gould Cummings in New York City, who is extremely politically minded and active, and in my experience, from my perspective, really just seems to get it, Another person that I think about is Honey Mahogany in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, who's also involved. And I guess I'm on this thought of electoral politics moment. Both of them made history in running for office. Honey serving both in city council, I believe. Both of them running for city council. Honey serving, and that is. In sort of my generation, of course, they are certainly not the first queer people to hold elected office, but it is rare for trans folks. There's certainly a few that are in state legislatures around the country and state senates, but I am just really inspired by how outspoken and active these ladies are, with a very sort of radical approach for the most part. Maybe Honey not as radical as Marty Gould Cummings. So I think about folks like that, and then I also think about activists who are really just relentlessly active in terms of community at the everyday level. I'll say, not in electoral politics. Queen Jean is an amazing woman, and just does some wonderful things.
I feel like I just saw her do some incredible design for some show. What was it that I just saw?
You did. Saturday Church, probably.
Yes, Saturday Church.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I mean,
did you see Saturday Church already?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I haven't seen the film. I've
so
only seen the play.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think she worked on the film.
And the performers.
But she did. Yeah. She's so fantastic, right? But then she also has a Black Trans Collective that she, makes. It's an entire movement that centers around, making sure that people are able to find community weekly, which is why it's so perfect that she's working on projects like Saturday Church, because in the film, and I'm obviously in the play, I'm sure as well, the folks are coming to the same location, to the community center, community space, to hold space with each other, learn, mentor, get ready to compete, doll themselves up, whatever they have to do. Every
the whole
single
Kiki
week.
scene is kind of coming together every week, and also providing dinner and support and
dinners,
affirmation,
and it's all those things, and beyond that, in the film, like health counseling and health resources, whatever they are, and things like that, and so that's what she also makes space and an atmosphere for in real life in New York, and it's wonderful. So yeah, so those are my three. How about you?
I was gonna say, it's just so incredible to realize that you are surrounded by people who you're like, oh, you are the icons that are going to be talked about. Like, I mean, you yourself, but folks who
they are
in the next generation, you're like, they are doing the work right now, every day, showing up and making sure that like people are fed, people are taken care of, people have the chance to express their most like exciting and beautiful self. Like, I think doing something like costumes, my partners work in wardrobe and set and costume, backstage theater stuff, and the chance to make someone look amazing and incredible, and to give them that space to take up a role that is like honored and revered, and to make them a beautiful garment, like that is love and care and community activism. So I just love that.
Honestly,
I love that. I've never met Queen Jean, but I'm a big fan.
Well, she's amazing. And I can't wait to see her costumes and in the show. Fantastic.
For me, icons. You were saying, what are my icons? And that is a difficult question. But there's one that comes to mind, and this is just because I've been thinking, how we're going to be talking soon to George Takei about his new memoir, It Rhymes with Takei, and we're very excited. That's our next book. If you're not in the book club, join up. If you are in the book club, you should be reading. But when I was thinking about George Takei, I think a lot about how he talks about being imprisoned as a young person in the Japanese internment camps during World War II. And for me, that made me think a lot about this figure who I have been interested in for a very long time, Kiyoshi Kuromiya, who was an incredible activist who similarly was incarcerated. I think Kiyoshi was held at Heart Mountain when he was very young, and who went on to be a major player in the civil rights movement. He befriended Martin Luther King. He was beaten at Selma. He was one of the... If you've ever seen those photos of like folks protesting for gay rights in like suits and dresses in black and white in the 60s, and they're carrying these little picket signs that say like, homosexuals deserve rights. There's like almost no people of
is
color.
That the more like liberal centrist version of the...
It's like the Daughters of Bilitis and the Mattachine Society, and they're protesting. And there's like one black woman, Ernest Eckerstein, and then there's like one Asian American guy, and that's Kiyoshi Kuromiya. And then from there, though, he goes like all of these incredible places. He goes on to be a world Scrabble champion. He goes on to be a vital member of ACT UP. When in the 80s, he starts to realize that folks need information that's going out in all these medical conferences to take care of their own health, people with AIDS, he creates a newsletter. And when that's not enough, he creates an internet service provider so that he can get people with AIDS online to then get information about these cases. And when that's not enough, he takes the first case ever to the Supreme Court to get medical marijuana legalized for people with AIDS. And he didn't win it. But the fact that he did all of that, and that he connected it all, much like as I think George does in his memoir, to his early experiences of being oppressed and discriminated against himself. Was he interned as well? He was, at Heart Mountain. And I think that just for me was such a... When I think about an icon, like you were saying with Queen Jean, it's the people who show up for their community, the broad community, not just people who they already know, not just people who are facing the same oppression as them, but people who they can see because of their own experiences are oppressed and need support. And Kiyoshi, for me, is one of those people who did that his entire life and deserves so much more recognition than he gets. So when I think about like icon trailblazers that came before me, those ones that I had no access to, only learned about as an adult, did not definitely know them as a kid, but Kiyoshi Kuromiya is one that I just always return to. I think, if anyone listening to this is like, I'd really like to write a biography or give someone the documentary their due, please, Kiyoshi is the one I would throw out there. Just a total icon.
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love that. Because there were some absolutely trailblazing, literal trailblazers who were queer. And their stories deserve to be told 100%. And I guess we are doing just that.
That's our job.
That's our, hey. And honestly, knowing who they are and understanding all about their life, I think it shines a light on what we need to do. Because if we look at all of these things, even the examples of the people, like we talk about Queen Jean, we talk about Kiyoshi, and these are people who on the surface, like just the top few descriptors might be mentioning things that I won't say the average, but people who are like cis, not queer people, and just outside of our community, maybe like, oh, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't relate to that. But when you really think about it, it really is at the end of the day, it's like people just fighting for protection from discrimination, wanting, to have access to not be dealing with food insecurity, not be dealing with, housing insecurity and violence, and have health care. Like, that's honestly, like, it's the same thing that we're all fighting for today.
Decade after decade, yeah. Not to be incarcerated for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So it's wild to me that, and so clearly there's a good chance that anybody from that is running these for-profit carceral systems are going to be trying to like recognize somebody who's fighting against, who's fighting for prison abolition. That's for sure.
Although, you feel like some of these people are so twisted that one day they're going to be like, we're opening up the Sylvia Rivera jail for trans people.
Oh, honey, once they whitewashed her thing and make sure that there was no radical morsel left in their story, and that they can position them as someone who bowed down to authority, followed all the rules, and was very magnanimous to the oppressors, then they'll get their plaque.
Yeah, then suddenly the name will go everywhere. That's always how it works. You get like defanged and you're safe.
Yeah. I think that's like they try to do with literal trans identity and Stonewall. I mean, I think for probably a good, I would say probably for about a good 10 years, right? Because I think throughout the 70s, I think, obviously, Marsha was still with us, and people were still, who were still around, who were there, like remembered only a decade before Stonewall. And so then into the 80s, I think as people started to pass and the stories started to dissipate a little bit, they probably had like mid 80s to mid 90s, or maybe just the 90s. To like really whitewash that Stonewall story.
Do you think
that's the time? Yeah. Do you think that's the timing of it? Do you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because there's like two books that come out in the early 2000s about Stonewall, and neither is perfect, but they both like say very explicitly it was trans and gender non-conforming people who are at the front of Stonewall, but history is really hard to document, and we don't have a lot of names, and we don't have this, and they're not using the language we have now, and those two books and those facts, the fact they put that gets completely erased. It's sort of like people reference them, but they don't read them, and they don't want to think about what's said inside them. They just and so I think that period, that like late 90s and the early 2000s is like when they smooth everything over, and it's like
it
the real historians
to
have
be
done
like,
the work.
Okay, yeah.
And then everyone comes along and makes a meme out of it and sort of erases what's there, and then we get things like, what was that Stonewall film with the like
they try to like give it that Stonewall movie like the Midnight Cowboy treatment, like this corn-fed guy moving to the big city and then getting into hustling just a little bit, and just maybe doing a little bit of this, a little sniffle and a little puff, and then then they're a victim, like whatever.
I mean, that in that generation, I feel like you could not watch a movie in the 80s and 90s without like, if somebody did drugs, you're like, you're gonna die. They had sex, you're like, you're dead next. It's
yeah.
It's like any amount. And I think that like that kind of treatment not only like softens and destroys the like essence of what they did, but also like makes it so hard to see the folks who are trailblazers today, because suddenly our vision of them is like perfect people who never did anything wrong, certainly didn't do drugs, weren't slutty, never angry, you know? And it's like, no. The people who are trailblazers were willing to do all that shit. And like they lived their lives, and if we ignore that, and we ignore the fact that sometimes maybe they were angry or difficult or druggy or outside society in other ways, then when we look around us today, it's hard to see the people doing the work because we expect them to have that kind of whitewashed, absolutely cleaned up lives.
And when we have that outlook on individuals, whomever they are, then it doesn't give any reverence to the conditions that would put somebody into a position like that in the first place. I mean, they're not like these angelic figures that like accidentally discovered some cocaine and then cocaine makes them be in the streets. They're in the streets because they were disenfranchised because of either they lost their job or maybe they got fired at that time for being queer or what have you. And so they were disenfranchised from this system, this capitalist system that needs these people to once you lose your place because, you can't afford to live there because your paycheck is $3 an hour and there's no pay raise and the rent goes up. Where are you going to go? You're going to go on the street. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I was talking to my girlfriends last night. And then I was talking to somebody the other day. This is so funny. And we were talking about like, oh my gosh, when you're down and out, like, and the notion of like, people who are either unhoused or people who are like sort of, don't have access to this and that and are falling on rough times. And the thought of them, or like the idea of their relationship to casual sex and recreational drugs, or maybe even a drug addiction, and how prevalent that may or may not be, and certainly how much of a stereotype that is. If they're homeless, they're on drugs, and if they're probably a prostitute in the streets and having sex everywhere, blah 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 blah. And I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody who I was, who was it? I can't remember who it was I was talking to initially, but they had interviewed Kevin Bacon, and around the mid 2008, and around 2008, around the crash, Kevin Bacon had also talked about having or I guess shortly after, I'm not sure. But Kevin Bacon apparently, and he's talked about this publicly, had invested with Bernie Madoff and lost everything. And
I had no idea.
I didn't know that either. But apparently he has talked about it. So that's that.
It's out there.
It's out there. And so they obviously lost everything, and they so famously live on the Upper West Side. Can't be a cheap place. And they lost everything and were like down and out, apparently in dire straits, at least for a period of time. And neither one of them was working at the time, and I think it was probably extended. And Kevin and Kira Cedric, his wife, were talking to each other and we're like, oh my God, we don't have anything. We have nothing left. What are we going to do? Like, just, going through that realization as one would. Yeah. And then they were like, when they realized they had nothing left to do, they were like, let's just fuck. Let's just get wild. And apparently, when you have nothing you can do, that's just what you do. You have nothing to do. You don't have to go to work. There's nothing you have. You don't feel like there's maybe something to look forward to, or there's no schedule to keep up to, and there's no.
Yeah, your time is free.
You're like, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm. You have your body.
That's what you're going to do.
That's, yep.
You have your body. That's what you're going to use it.
You're going to use it, yeah. When I was writing my book on the prison in Greenwich Village, the women's house of detention, I was reading about this woman who was arrested in the 50s, and she sort of confounded the police because she was a black woman who had grown up pretty wealthy. She was went to private schools and then was conservatory trained in piano. She was a really advanced musician. She was one of the first, Hidden Figures, the computers who know how to do the punch work.
Yeah,
that's what she was trained to do for her day job. So she had a good day job, but she was also a nightclub singer who's trying to put out an album, and she's going to early gay organizing groups. She's really smart and really part of everything that's kind of happening and of the moment. And she gets arrested eventually for prostitution. And the police and the social workers were all like, someone must have abducted her or taught her this or told her how to become part of the seedy world. And in the interview I found, she looks at her social worker and she was like, no one had to tell me how to do prostitution. That is literally, once I had no money and nowhere to live, it was very obvious that was the job that was available to me. And she was just so point blank about it, and they were so fucking dumb. They were absolutely convinced that someone must have tricked you,
corrupted you, tempted you into this to leave your whitewashed lifestyle and tempted you to the dark side of debauchery. Oh Lord.
And she just was like, you people are so dumb. And that's what I loved about her, is that she was she was middle class, but she understood that sex work was something that everyone has available to them as a last option, and I shouldn't say everyone. There's always reasons why people cannot do any kind of work, but that someone like her who had a able body that she was able to use to make money, that was not something she needed to be corrupted into. And look, she's not someone who ever ended up famous, but in terms of trailblazers, again, another person who I think of in my life, her honesty, her willingness to do what she needed to do to survive and be the person that she was, those are the folks whose shoulders we stand on. I almost said standards we shoulder on, which does not mean a single goddamn thing.
I would shoulder their stand on or whatever. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I had not even. I was so I have to read Women's House of Detention again. I've read it and was like, oh my God, I'm learning so much. Okay.
Me too, as I was writing it.
And I was like, this is wild that people do know this, but everyone doesn't. And it's not even general common knowledge, at least to the people that I talk to when I'll bring up a point or two, something that I remember from the book, and they'll be like, what, really? What? And it's just, my point is that they can do that. They can say, oh, they must have just been tempted into this because none of us do that. We're normal. When you can erase our history, there's no record anywhere of half these things, a lot of the time, and so they can erase that and then put in what they want, and then suddenly you look like an outlier, the person who just you're the first prostitute ever. I can't believe you had the gall to do such a thing, darling.
Yes. No, I mean, I think you look at the word trailblazer, I mean, that's what it means, right? These are the people who left us the blazes that we are following to move forward. And that's what it means to be an icon. It often means to be out of time, to be out of society, to be doing the things that we're told not to do, because that's where the trails that need to be marked, that need to be made are. If it was the easy path, everybody would walk down it and you would not be a trailblazer.
I think so much about right now what they're trying to do with regards to gender affirming care in the United States and passing all of these laws that restrict access to gender affirming care, and the stories and the excuses that they use, the reasons that they use around those things, which is it's experimental, it's mutilation, we don't know enough about it, all of these different things. And which is a complete lie. I mean, even in recent history, we have a record of people using things like hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
That's not just for transgender people. And still, whenever it comes to transgender people, they talk about it as though no one's ever taken testosterone or estrogen before. And, you know, and meanwhile, they meaning medical professionals and I'm sure very willing parents make the decision to prescribe their cisgender children hormone replacement therapy or whatever they need to for precocious puberties, to treat precocious puberties and to treat different types of, you know, genetic syndromes and things like that, like on a chromosomal level. Like there's lots of reasons why people receive hormone replacement therapy. And we don't hear that ever get addressed, which just seems so unfair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And why?
It's not about the actual therapy. It's about the identity of the person receiving it, which should not change the medical, like, is it good, is it bad? But, of course, because this isn't about any particular therapy, you know, it's about stopping kids from walking down the path of the trailblazers we've just been talking about. It's like they can't get rid of Marcia, so they'll stop kids from following.
That makes me wonder, like, what it was like for Christine Jorgensen back in the day. Because, you know, like, she was sort of, you know, held as this, like, scientific marvel, you know, at least in the States. And I don't know if that's just because I don't know if it's only because she had the audacity to medically transition, or if it's because they couldn't even, it was almost unfathomable that like they couldn't even conceive of understand the idea of someone medically transitioning. You know, I'm sure that obviously they can understand someone who they describe as a man just now wanting to be a woman, but like medically, that this wasn't like, you know, experimental in the sort of from the perspective of, we don't know what we're doing, let's just slice and dice and see what happens. These are people who had studied as much as they could up until that point, the human body and you know, everything that has to do with sex and surgery and you know, it's not brand new.
And they weren't here in America, because in America we were certainly behind the times at acknowledging that kind of medicine, behind the times on learning that kind. We were not blazing that trail. She had to travel
at all.
And I think part of the reason people were so surprised, or at least to me, what I think about is like that she was, you know, a soldier beforehand, and she was white, and she wanted to be a lady, you know, and I think that's part of the reason people really flipped their wigs, was like they could imagine some sort of
some street freak who's out in the street traipsing around in
doing drugs and sex work and blah blah blah. But not Christine Jorgensen. She was, you know, a nice white girl from the Bronx.
What was the name of one of the first centers in I think in the 60s or 70s that were offering gender affirming care? Wasn't Johns
Hopkins? They were pretty early. It
was Johns Hopkins.
Early.
And they were behind. I mean, I'm just thinking about, they were behind, and there was a lot of flawed practices and science, and pretty harmful, I think, from what I've read, you know, just on the surface level, you know, and so you're just to your point, like we were 100% behind, and I'm hoping that we don't have another moment where there's like this big epistemicide and we like and lose all of that information again. I don't think that we will, because we do have computers, I guess, which is different than like burning an actual book. What do you think?
But I wonder, you know, it's funny, I read this book called We the Dead. It's all about archiving and what we remember and how we remember it.
It's not about zombies?
I wish. It's well, in a sense, because I guess it's all about how we live on after we die, but in our information. So Zombie Us.
Okay.
But there's this great quote in there where he talks to this woman who's like all about internet archiving and how we preserve data, and she says to him, the good thing about all of this is that everything on the internet is designed to last forever, or for 5 years, whichever comes first. And I feel that way sometimes about, like, have you tried to open up a backup data file that you put on a spare drive 15 years ago?
Oh my God, then it doesn't even open sometimes.
Yeah, can't even know how to connect that thing to my computer anymore, you know? And it's like, well, I guess I'll just never know what's on that little brick.
Because it was just a way to sell it. As long as you bought it, that's all they cared about.
I think the thing that's going to keep us from ending up in that kind of situation again is the thing that kept us going between when Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science was burned by the Nazis and, like, now, which is this, you know, queer people talking to one another and keeping the memories alive. You know, Marsha's memory exists because trans people and black queer trans people and all the activists remembered her, and because Tourmaline wrote that fucking book, right? And that's not because the files were kept somewhere safe or we always had access to them. It's because individual queer people do this work, have done this work, continue to do this work, whether it's writing books, hosting a podcast, or just being at the, you know, queer event and talking to the person next to you and saying, have you ever heard of Christine Jorgensen? I think you'd be interested, you know? It's that kind of like that horizontal transmission. We can't depend on vertical institutions. They're not always going to be there for us, and we have to do this.
Absolutely not. I mean, within our own lifetimes, we're seeing, you know, a resurgence of HIV, you know, people testing positive for HIV within our lifetimes. And it's like, we're only a couple decades out, you know, and people aren't even getting sex ed in their schooling. And like, you think, where are people going to learn about these things? You know, I guess from the community, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess they can try to Google their own stuff, but, you know, like, it's wild to me that's not being instilled. So I do think it's important that we constantly speak their names and remind people. And so let's do that right here, right now. You know?
Yeah, I think that's what we're here for.
I'll start. Kiyoshi Kuromaya.
Queen Jean.
Christine Jorgensen.
Oh. Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and Tourmaline.
Stormy Delavarre.
Billie Jean King.
Pauli Murray.
Yes, Pauli Murray. Pauli Murray and Gladys Bentley.
Billy Tipton.
Oh. International Crisis. Which is far and away an amazing name. Just the best name. International Crisis.
She was amazing. Of course, Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde. How could I forget the Irish man back there at the beginning of so much of what we think of as camp and dandyism? And, you know, there are so many of these people. They're the ones whose standards we shoaled on. This is, you know, it's so great to get to do this, to actually talk about these people and to laugh and enjoy it. And yeah, some of them lived hard lives, but like to say their names as a blessing, you know, to be shared as an act of resistance and memory, and to do that with you, it means so much. I think that's a great way to wrap up today's talking. I think that this is where we are meant to be, doing the work, sharing these names and sharing these stories.
That's all we have to do. That's all we have to do is keep them alive. And I just think of now I'm envisioning them as a bunch of queer zombies, keeping their stories alive and going after they have passed. And I'm kind of excited by that because I would definitely see that movie. I'm really just so energized by this and really excited to go into the next month. Of course, we have George Takei. If you've been listening to it,
right here.
You have it. Yes, it rhymes with
note
Takei. If you have been listening to this and you've made it this far into the conversation, please make sure if you're watching this on YouTube that you leave some rainbow hearts in the comments for us, please. And if you're listening
and let
to
us know your icons.
Let us know your icons, especially if you're listening to this on any other platform.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This means so much. And I know we toss out a lot of people, a lot of names. So also ask us questions. If there's somebody we mentioned that you're like, who to what? Huh? International what? Ask away. We're here for you because, again, that's what this is about, talking to each other. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching.
I can't believe that this is it, but we actually we gave you all, honestly, a lot to think about and a lot of people to try to study into. But first, start by going back and speaking about Marcia. We just scratched the surface because there are a lot of, I would say, bonus footage, videos, and maybe not a lot. There's several though, interviews and
look up the hot peaches. You'll see her performing.
Yeah, you can, and then you can totally check out online if you want more content for sure. But we're really grateful that we have all these icons and people, trailblazers that we can continue to bring you, and we'll also bring you stories from people who are not. And so make sure that you are following our book club and a member of our book club, and we will be back next week with another episode. Make sure that you like and subscribe this, share this, and we will see you on the next one. I'm Peppermint.
Bye. I'm Hugh the Historian, and we'll see you on Tuesdays.
Peace. Thank you so much for joining us today.
This podcast is part of Pride House Media, hosted by us, Peppermint and Hugh, produced and edited by Josh Rosenzweig, with original music composed by Nell Balaban.
If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And while you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps others discover the show.
You can stay connected and join the conversation by following us at Peppermint 24/7 or write to us at questions@queer101podcast.com.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our history is your history. Stay proud, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on Queer 101.